Long, long ago, before the first maps were ever drawn, and before the first small boats were carved from the trunks of cedar trees, the world breathed in a different rhythm. And the great blue cradle we call the Mediterranean was a place of vast, quiet transformation if you were to stand on a high, rocky ridge where the air is cool and the scent of wild thyme drifts on a slow breeze. You might look out toward the horizon and see not a sea of shimmering turquoise, but a deep and silent basin, a valley so wide it seems to touch the very edge of the sky. This was a time of stillness, a time when the earth was reshaping itself with the slow, patient movements of a giant turning in its sleep. The Great Basin was once a hollow of salt and sun, a landscape of shimmering white plains and deep, dry canyons where the heat rose in soft waves, and the only sound was the occasional whistle of the wind moving through pillars of ancient stone. Imagine the air in this deep basin, thick and heavy with the scent of sun-baked earth and the faint, sharp tang of mineral salts. It was a world of pale colors, of creams and ochres and the brilliant, blinding white of salt flats that stretched for miles like a frozen sea. There were no waves lapping against the shore, no spray of salt water to cool the skin, only the steady, rhythmic pulse of the sun warming the ground. The earth here was old and tired, resting under the weight of the sky, waiting for a change that would take thousands of years to arrive. In the deepest parts of this valley, the ground was crusted with layers of salt so thick they felt like stone beneath your feet, a quiet testament to the water that had once been there and had slowly, quietly drifted away into the clouds. As the centuries drifted by, the Great Barrier to the west, where the mountains of the north nearly touched the mountains of the south, stood like a silent guardian. This was the threshold, a narrow strip of land that held back the vast, restless weight of the Atlantic Ocean. On one side, the ocean pulsed with deep, cold currents and the steady rhythm of the tides, while on the other, the Mediterranean basin lay in a long, sun-drenched slumber. The air above the basin was clear and still, and at night the stars appeared so bright and so close that you might feel you could reach out and touch their cold, silver light. It was a landscape of profound peace, a place where time seemed to have stopped, allowing the rocks and the dust to settle into a permanent, quiet beauty. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the earth began to shift, moving with the heavy, deliberate grace of tectonic plates finding a new way to rest. The land bridge at the western edge began to bow and sag, worn down by the patient work of the elements and the invisible pressures of the deep earth. There was no rush, no hurry in this process. It was a transition that unfolded over lifetimes, a gentle yielding of the earth to the persistent call of the sea. You can almost feel the tension in the air, a quiet anticipation as the barrier grew thinner, the rock becoming porous and the soil softening under the weight of the Atlantic steady, rhythmic push. There came a moment, a quiet turning point in the history of the world, when the first thin trickle of salt water found its way over the lip of the land. It was a small beginning, a silver thread of water winding its way down the parched slopes, darkening the dry earth and bringing with it the cool, sharp scent of the open ocean. This water did not come with a roar, but with a soft, persistent hiss as it touched the hot salt of the basin floor. It was a gentle greeting between two worlds, the beginning of a long and steady reunion that would change the face of the earth forever. The water moved like silk, flowing into the cracks and crevices of the valley, filling the low places with a shallow, shimmering film that reflected the soft blues and pinks of the morning sky. As the days turned into years and the years into centuries, the trickle became a stream, and the stream became a steady, flowing river. The sound of the water was a constant, low hum, a lullaby that echoed through the vast canyons and over the salt plains. It was the sound of life returning, a slow and deliberate filling of a great vessel. The air began to change, losing its heavy, dry heat and becoming soft and moist, carrying the fragrance of sea spray and damp earth. The white salt flats were slowly covered by a layer of clear, blue water, turning the basin into a mirror that captured the movement of the clouds and the shifting light of the sun. It was a transformation of light and color, a gradual softening of the landscape as the edges of the world were smoothed by the rising tide. The water rose with a patient, unhurried grace, climbing the sides of the mountains and filling the deep valleys until the peaks became islands and the high ridges became coastlines. The islands sat like green jewels in a setting of lapis lazuli, their slopes covered in hardy shrubs and small, silver-leafed trees that drank in the new moisture from the air. The sea was calm and deep, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to hold the sunlight within its depths. If you were to drift upon this new sea, you would feel the gentle swell of the water beneath you, a rhythmic swaying that lulls the mind and relaxes the body. The surface of the water was often as smooth as glass, broken only by the occasional leap of a fish or the soft ripple of a breeze. This was the birth of the Mediterranean as we know it, a sea born from a long silence and a slow, steady influx of life. It was a sea that invited exploration, with its many bays and sheltered coves, its clear waters that allowed you to see deep into the sandy bottom where the seagrass swayed in the current. The climate around the sea began to settle into a comfortable, predictable pattern with warm, golden summers and mild, rainy winters that turned the hillsides a vibrant, mossy green. The air was filled with the sound of cicadas in the heat of the afternoon and the soft hoot of owls in the cool of the night. It was a world that felt complete, a place where the land and the sea had found a perfect, lasting balance. Along the new coastlines, the soil was rich and dark, fed by the minerals of the old basin and the moisture of the new sea. Wild olives began to grow, their twisted trunks and silver-green leaves becoming a permanent fixture of the landscape. The smell of the sea mingled with the scent of pine needles and the sweet, earthy aroma of ripening fruit. It was a sensory tapestry, a place where every breeze brought a new and pleasant fragrance, and every view was a study in the harmony of earth and water. The people who would eventually come to these shores would find a land that felt as though it had been prepared for them, a place of abundance and peace where the sea was a constant, friendly companion. The Mediterranean was not just a body of water. It was a bridge, a way for the different parts of the world to touch one another. The calm waters made it possible to travel from one headland to the next, always keeping the land in sight, moving slowly and safely across the blue expanse. The sea was a teacher, showing those who lived on its shores how to read the stars, how to understand the winds, and how to build vessels that could dance upon the waves. It was a conversation that had begun between the continents, a quiet exchange of ideas and goods that would flow as steadily as the water itself. As you think about this ancient sea, let your mind rest on the image of the water at twilight, when the sun has dipped below the horizon and the sky is a wash of deep violet and soft indigo. The sea becomes a dark, velvet mirror reflecting the first pale stars and the silver sliver of the moon. The waves lap against the shore with a sound like a soft breath, a rhythmic shushing that tells you the world is at peace. The heat of the day has faded, replaced by a cool, gentle air that smells of salt and ancient stone. Everything is still, everything is quiet, and the great sea rests in the cradle of the three continents, a vast and silent witness to the passage of time. The salt plains are gone, buried deep beneath the blue, and in their place is a world of movement and light. The deep canyons are now hidden valleys of coral and kelp, where the fish move in slow, graceful clouds through the filtered sunlight. The high ridges that once looked out over a dry abyss are now the cliffs of Italy, the mountains of Greece and the sun-drenched shores of North Africa. The sea has unified them, drawing them together into a single, beautiful landscape that feels both vast and intimate. It is a place where you can lose yourself in the horizon, knowing that just beyond the curve of the earth, another shore is waiting, just as peaceful and just as still. The transition from a dry basin to a thriving sea was a masterclass in patience, a reminder that the greatest changes often happen in the quietest ways. There was no need for haste, no need for noise. There was only the steady, inevitable flow of water and the slow, graceful response of the land. As the water filled the last of the deep hollows, the Mediterranean became a whole, a single blue heartbeat at the center of the world. The air above it became a highway for birds, their wings beating a soft rhythm as they migrated from north to south, following the scent of the water and the warmth of the sun. Now, as the stars grow brighter in the velvet sky, we can imagine the sea as it is today, a place of timeless beauty and profound calm. The water is cool and inviting, the shore is warm and steady, and the air is filled with the peace of a world that has found its balance. The story of the sea is a story of coming home, of a landscape finding its true form and a basin finding its purpose. It is a story that invites us to slow down, to breathe deeply, and to let the rhythmic pulse of the water guide us into a deep and restful sleep. The islands, scattered like emeralds across the blue, are places of deep silence. On a quiet night, you can hear the wind moving through the dry grasses and the distant, melodic chime of a bell from a hillside fold. The world feels small and safe, tucked into the folds of the coastlines, protected by the vast, encircling arms of the sea. The water is a blanket, thick and blue, covering the ancient secrets of the dry basin and replacing them with the vibrant, pulsing life of the ocean. It is a transformation that is both complete and ongoing, a gentle reminder of the Earth's capacity for renewal and rest. As we move from the memory of the dry basin into the reality of the living sea, we find ourselves drifting on the surface of a deep and quiet understanding. The Mediterranean has always been a place of meeting, a place where the sun and the water, the land and the sky, come together in a perfect, shimmering harmony. The light of the moon dances on the small waves, creating a path of silver that leads toward the horizon, toward the next chapter of our journey. The air is soft, the water is still, and the world is settling down for a long and peaceful night. The scent of wild lavender and rosemary drifts down from the hills, mingling with the cool breath of the sea. It is a fragrance that speaks of ancient summers and long, quiet afternoons spent in the shade of an olive tree. The ground is still warm from the sun, but the air is refreshing, a gentle caress that encourages the eyes to close and the mind to wander into the realm of dreams. The sea is a constant, a steady presence that has watched the world change and has remained, in its essence, a place of profound and enduring peace. In the next part of our journey, we will step onto the shores of these ancient lands, feeling the soft sand between our toes and the warmth of the sun on our shoulders. We will explore the way the people of the coast learn to live in harmony with the water, building their homes from the pale stone of the cliffs and planting their gardens in the rich, dark soil. But for now, we remain here, drifting on the calm surface of the sea that nearly dried out, listening to the soft rhythm of the waves and the quiet whisper of the wind. The world is vast, the sea is deep, and everything is exactly as it should be. The stars are watching over the water, the moon is guiding the tides, and the Mediterranean is a cradle of peace, holding us gently as we drift toward the quiet shores of sleep. The moon continues its slow journey across the black velvet sky, and as the light catches the crests of the small, rhythmic waves, we begin to see the shapes of the land rising out of the deep. These are not the vast, unending stretches of the continents, but the scattered jewels of the Mediterranean, the islands that sit like stepping stones across a turquoise floor. If you were to look down from a great height, you would see them as a handful of golden seeds tossed into the blue, each one a small world of its own, waiting in the stillness of the afternoon sun. There is a particular kind of silence that lives on an island, a quiet that is wrapped in the sound of the sea, where the air smells of dried wild thyme and the sharp, clean scent of salt drying on warm stones. Imagine stepping onto the shore of a small island in the Aegean, where the sand is as fine as powdered sugar and the water laps at your ankles with the temperature of a sun-warmed bath. The light here is different than it is on the mainland. It is brighter, clearer, and seems to bounce off the white limestone cliffs until the whole world feels as though it is glowing from within. There is no rush here, no urgency to the day, only the slow movement of the sun as it tracks its path from one horizon to the other. You can hear the rhythmic clicking of the cicadas in the olive groves, a steady pulsing sound that becomes a blanket of noise, so constant and so natural that it eventually fades into the background, leaving you in a state of deep, effortless calm. These islands have always been the resting places for travelers, the spots where the ancient wooden ships would pull into a sheltered cove to wait out a change in the wind. You can see the remnants of their presence in the smooth, worn paths that wind up from the beaches into the hills, paths that have been trodden by sandals for thousands of years. The stones underfoot are polished by time, rounded and soft, leading you past low walls made of stacked dry rock where small green lizards bask in the heat. There is a sense of deep time here, a feeling that the landscape has not changed in a very long time, and that the wind blowing through the silver leaves of the olive trees today is the very same wind that cooled the faces of sailors long ago. As we move inland, the air grows warmer and carries the scent of the macchia. That thick, fragrant scrub of rosemary, myrtle and lavender that covers the hillsides like a heavy green coat. When you brush against these plants, they release their oils into the air, a perfume that is earthy and sweet, grounding you in the present moment. The soil here is often a rich, burnt orange, a color that contrasts beautifully with the deep green of the pines and the endless, shimmering blue of the water that is always visible through the trees. Every turn of the path offers a new view of the sea, a horizon that seems to stretch on forever, blurring the line where the water meets the sky until both are a single, peaceful shade of indigo. In the center of these islands, you might find a small village, a cluster of houses with thick stone walls painted a brilliant, chalky white to reflect the heat of the sun. The windows are small and shuttered against the midday light, and the doorways are draped with heavy vines of bougainvillea, their magenta flowers vibrant against the pale stone. The streets are narrow and winding, designed to catch the breeze and provide shade, paved with large, flat flagstones that feel cool beneath your feet. There is a stillness in these villages during the heat of the day, a time when the world seems to hold its breath and everyone retreats into the cool, dark interiors of their homes for a long, restorative rest. You can almost hear the soft clinking of a ceramic pitcher against a glass as someone pours a drink of cool water, the sound echoing softly in the quiet street. The shadows are long and blue, stretching across the courtyards where large terracotta pots hold lemon trees heavy with fruit. The scent of the lemons is sharp and bright, cutting through the heavy sweetness of the flowers, a reminder of the abundance that these small patches of land provide. Life here is measured not by hours or minutes, but by the ripening of the grapes on the vine, the turning of the olives from green to black, and the slow, steady growth of the cedar trees that stand like sentinels on the ridges. Further west, the islands change their character, becoming larger and more rugged, with great mountains that rise up to meet the clouds. On an island like Corsica or Sardinia, the interior is a labyrinth of granite peaks and hidden valleys where the air is cooler and smells of damp earth and pine needles. Here, the sound of the sea is a distant murmur, replaced by the trickling of small streams that find their way down from the heights, carving smooth channels through the rock. The water in these streams is crystal clear and cold, a gift from the mountains to the thirsty land below. You can sit by the edge of such a stream and watch the way the light dances on the surface of the pool, creating shifting patterns of gold and shadow on the sandy bottom. The people who have lived on these islands for generations have a special relationship with the sea, viewing it not as a barrier, but as a wide, open road. They built their lives around the rhythms of the water, knowing exactly when the fish would run and when the storms would gather on the horizon. Their boats, painted in bright primary colors with eyes sometimes carved onto the prows to watch for the way home, bob gently in the harbors, their wooden hulls creaking softly as they rub against the piers. It is a comforting sound, a rhythmic groaning of wood and rope that speaks of safety and the end of a journey. In the evenings, the islands begin to cool, and a gentle breeze blows in from the water, carrying the freshness of the deep sea. The white walls of the houses take on a soft, rosy hue as the sun begins to set, and the long shadows of the cypress trees point like fingers toward the east. This is the time when the islands seem to settle down, pulling the blanket of the twilight around them. The kitchens begin to fill with the smell of roasting vegetables and fresh bread. The wood smoke from the small fires drifting up into the darkening sky. It is a time for quiet conversation, for sitting on a stone bench and watching the stars begin to poke through the fabric of the night. Each island has its own story, its own particular way of being. Yet they all share this same connection to the water that surrounds them. They are anchors in the shifting currents of history, places where the pace of life is dictated by the seasons and the tides. On the Balearic Islands, the wind whistles through the sails of old stone windmills, their wooden gears turning with a slow, rhythmic thud that sounds like a heartbeat. In the Maltese archipelago, the honey-colored stone of the ancient temples glows in the fading light, holding the heat of the day long after the sun has disappeared. These places are repositories of quiet, sanctuaries where the noise of the outside world is filtered through the vastness of the sea. As you drift deeper into the heart of the Mediterranean, you might find yourself on a very small island, one so tiny it has no name on the larger maps. It is nothing more than a few acres of rock and scrub, a place where the seabirds come to rest. The only sound here is the wash of the waves against the shore and the occasional cry of a gull circling overhead. The ground is covered in small, colorful pebbles smoothed by the action of the water over centuries until they look like precious gems. You can pick one up and feel its weight in your hand. A cool, solid piece of the earth that has been shaped by the endless patience of the sea. There is a profound sense of peace in being surrounded by water, a feeling of being protected and held by the natural world. The islands are like cradles, rocking gently in the swell of the Mediterranean, providing a home for all who seek their shores. The trees here grow deep roots, anchoring themselves into the rocky soil, standing firm against the winter winds and soaking up the summer sun. The goats wander the hillsides with bells around their necks, the soft tinkling sound drifting across the valleys like a lullaby, signaling the end of another peaceful day. The history of these islands is not one of grand events, but of the quiet persistence of life. It is the story of the potter shaping a clay jar, the weaver working at a loom, and the fisherman mending his nets by the light of a lantern. It is the story of families gathering under the shade of a large oak tree to share a meal, the sound of their laughter mingling with the rustle of the leaves. These are the threads that make up the fabric of island life, simple and enduring, woven together by the common experience of living in the middle of the sea. As the night deepens, the islands become dark shapes against the lighter darkness of the water. The lights of the villages twinkle like fallen stars, reflecting in the calm surface of the harbors. The air is still now, the wind having died down with the sun, and the only movement is the slow, rhythmic breathing of the sea. You can imagine the islands as giant sleeping creatures, their rocky spines rising out of the depths, resting contentedly in the vast blue expanse. The water cradles them, washing over their shores with a gentle, repetitive motion that invites you to close your eyes and let go of the day. The islands are a reminder that even in a vast world, there are places of intimacy and quiet, places where you can hear your own breath and feel the pulse of the earth. They are the punctuation marks in the long sentence of the Mediterranean, giving us a place to pause and reflect before moving on. The salt in the air acts as a balm, clearing the mind and soothing the spirit, while the warmth of the stones remains a lingering comfort against the cool of the night. You are safe here, tucked away on a small piece of land in the middle of a friendly sea, where the only requirement is to exist and to be still. We think of the olive trees again, their gnarled trunks twisted into beautiful, complex shapes by the passage of time. They have seen centuries of moonrises, and they stand now in the silver light, their leaves shimmering like coins. They do not hurry to grow. They simply endure, providing shade and fruit and beauty to all who pass by. Their roots reach down into the dark, cool earth drawing up the nourishment they need to survive the heat of the summer. There is a wisdom in their stillness, a lesson in the way they accept the sun and the rain with equal grace. The sea around the islands is full of life, too, but it is a quiet, hidden life beneath the surface. The seagrass meadows wave slowly in the currents, and the fish dart among the rocks in a silent ballet. The water is a world of its own, a place of muted colors and soft light where the pressure of the world above is lifted. When you look out over the water from the shore of an island, you are looking at a vast reservoir of calm, a body of water that has seen the rise and fall of civilizations but remains, at its heart, a place of profound tranquility. The transition from the islands to the great coastlines of the mainland is a gentle one, for the sea that connects them is the same. The water that laps at the shores of a tiny Greek islet eventually finds its way to the long, sandy beaches of North Africa or the rugged cliffs of Italy. It is a continuous loop of motion, a grand circulation that keeps the Mediterranean alive and vibrant. But for now, we remain among the islands, letting the rhythm of the waves and the scent of the wild herbs lull us into a state of total relaxation. The stars above the islands are bright and clear, unaffected by the lights of the great cities. You can see the Milky Way stretching across the sky like a river of light, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and our small, cozy place within it. The silence of the night is absolute, broken only by the very faint sound of the water touching the land. It is a sound that has been constant since the beginning of time, a heartbeat for the world that never falters and never rushes. As we prepare to leave the islands behind and turn our thoughts toward the great cities that sit upon the edges of this sea, we take with us the peace of the hidden coves and the stillness of the olive groves. The islands have given us a sense of perspective, a reminder that life can be simple and beautiful when it is lived in harmony with the natural world. The warmth of the sun-baked earth stays with us, a gentle heat that radiates from the memory of the stones and the sand. The Mediterranean continues to hold us, its waters cool and inviting, its history a long, slow song that hums in the background of our thoughts. We are drifting now, moving away from the rocky shores and out into the deeper water, where the surface is as smooth as glass and the reflection of the moon is a long, shimmering path leading us forward. The air is soft and heavy with the promise of rest, and the world is growing smaller and quieter with every passing moment. As the islands fade into the soft mists of the night, we find ourselves moving toward the places where the land meets the sea in a different way, where the hands of humans have shaped the coast into harbors and quays. But the spirit of the islands remains, a quiet presence that reminds us of the beauty of solitude and the comfort of the shore. The sea is a bridge, and as we cross it, we are carried by the gentle strength of the currents, moving effortlessly toward the next chapter of our journey, where the lights of the great ports wait to welcome us into their calm and sheltered waters. The great stone basins of the ancient harbors are waiting for us, their waters held in a permanent, glassy stillness that reflects the pale rose of the dawn and the deep indigo of the coming night. As we drift closer, the rhythmic slapping of the tide against the limestone quays becomes the heartbeat of the world, a steady and reassuring pulse that has not changed for thousands of years. These are the places where the three continents reached out to touch one another, stretching their granite arms into the salt spray to pull the wandering ships into a safe and quiet embrace. To look upon a harbor like Alexandria or the old port of Marseille is to see a cradle made of rock, designed solely to keep the restless motion of the deep sea at a distance so that the work of connection could begin in peace. Imagine the scent of these places, a thick and comforting perfume of cedar wood, dried coriander and the sweet, heavy musk of ripening figs resting in woven baskets. The air is never truly still here, but it moves with a purposeful softness, carrying the sounds of 1,000 small tasks being performed with practiced ease. There is the low hum of voices murmuring in a dozen different tongues, the soft thud of a hemp rope falling onto a wooden deck, and the distant, melodic clink of a blacksmith's hammer shaping a new anchor. In the harbors that never closed, time did not move in the sharp lines of a clock, but in the long, slow curves of the tides and the arrival of the seasonal winds that brought the world to the doorstep of the shore. The stones themselves have a story to tell, worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals and the heavy sliding of amphorae filled with olive oil and wine. If you were to run your hand along the sun-warmed surface of a harbor wall, you would feel the grain of the rock that was quarried from the hills of Lebanon or the islands of Greece, brought here to stand as a silent witness to the meeting of civilizations. These walls were built wide and deep, rooted in the sandy floor of the seabed, creating a sanctuary where a sailor could finally close his eyes and know that the ship would not stray. The water inside the harbor is a different color than the wild blue of the open sea. Here it is a pale, translucent green, so clear that you can see the small silver fish darting between the submerged stones and the slow waving of the emerald seaweed in the current. In the center of these bustling ports, the great warehouses stood like silent giants, their thick walls keeping the interior cool even when the Mediterranean sun was at its height. Inside, the light filtered through small, high windows and long, dusty beams, illuminating the treasures of three worlds as they waited to be moved inland. There were stacks of papyrus scrolls from the banks of the Nile, smelling of dried reeds and ancient sunlight, and piles of wool dyed in the deep, regal purple of the sea snail. The floors were often covered in a fine dusting of grain, a golden powder that smelled of the earth and the harvest, reminding everyone that the sea was the great provider that fed the cities of the north with the bounty of the south. The life of the harbor was a slow and steady dance of logistics, a quiet choreography of loading and unloading that went on from the first light of morning until the stars appeared in the velvet sky. There was no rush, for the sea taught everyone the virtue of patience. A ship might wait for days for the perfect wind, its crew resting in the shade of the porticos, sharing stories of the strange birds they had seen or the way the phosphorescence glowed in their wake during a moonless crossing. They spoke of the lighthouses that guided them, those tall towers of white stone that stood at the entrance of every great port, their fires burning brightly with the wood of 1,000 trees to act as a steady, flickering star for those seeking the way home. To enter a harbor was to step into a library of human experience, where every crate and every jar held a piece of a distant land. The pottery of the Aegean, painted with delicate black figures and swirling vines, sat alongside the sturdy, functional jars of the North African coast. These objects did not just carry goods. They carried ideas, the shapes of letters, the melodies of songs, and the secrets of how to grow a better vine or weave a stronger sail. The harbor was the great translator, the place where the rough edges of different cultures were smoothed away through the simple, daily act of exchange. It was a place of profound hospitality, where the stranger was not a guest to be feared, but a messenger bringing news from over the horizon. As the sun begins to dip lower, casting long golden shadows across the quay, the activity of the harbor does not cease, but it softens into a more intimate rhythm. The heavy lifting of the day is done, and the merchants sit on low wooden stools, their ledgers open, recording the day's successes in neat, flowing script. The ink dries slowly in the humid air, each letter a small anchor on the page. Nearby, a group of children might be sitting on the edge of the stone wall, their legs dangling over the water, watching the way the ripples catch the orange light of the sunset. They are waiting for the fishing boats to return, those small, sturdy vessels that hug the coastline, bringing in the evening catch of sea bass and red mullet. The sounds of the evening harbor are perhaps the most soothing of all. There is the gentle creaking of the wooden masts as the ships sway in unison, a sound like a forest breathing in its sleep. The water laps against the hulls with a soft, hollow thud, a liquid percussion that lulls the tired sailors into a deep and dreamless slumber. In the nearby taverns, the smell of roasting garlic and grilled fish wafts through the open doors, mingling with the salt air to create a sense of profound contentment. This is the reward for the long journey, the knowledge that the walls are strong, the anchors are set, and the world is at rest. In the great port of Carthage, the harbor was a marvel of circular engineering, a ring of water that allowed ships to glide into their berths with the grace of swans returning to a pond. The architecture was designed to be both functional and beautiful, a testament to the belief that the gateway to a city should be as grand as the city itself. The white columns of the administrative buildings reflected in the water, doubling the beauty of the scene and creating a sense of infinite space and light. Here, the North African breeze would carry the scent of jasmine and orange blossoms from the inland gardens, a sweet reminder of the fertile earth that lay just beyond the stone quays. Further north, in the hidden coves of the Dalmatian coast, the harbors were smaller but no less vital. They were carved into the rugged limestone cliffs, protected from the winds by the high, gray walls of the mountains. In these quiet inlets, the water is so still it looks like a sheet of dark silk, and the only sound is the occasional cry of a night bird or the splash of a leaping fish. These were the stepping stones of the Mediterranean, the quiet resting places that allowed the great chain of trade to remain unbroken from the Pillars of Hercules to the shores of the Levant. The harbours never truly closed because the sea never truly sleeps. Even in the middle of the night, a lone watchman might walk the length of the pier, his lantern casting a warm, amber glow on the wet stones. He looks out over the dark expanse of the water, seeing the distant, twinkling lights of other ships that are still making their way toward the shore. He knows that by morning, the quay will be alive again with the soft bustle of arrival, the unfolding of sails and the sharing of the morning meal. The continuity of this cycle is what gave the ancient world its strength, a sense of permanence in a world of constant motion. As we linger in the twilight of the harbor, we can feel the weight of the day lifting, replaced by the cool, refreshing touch of the night air. The stars begin to appear one by one, reflecting in the dark mirror of the basin until it feels as though the ships are floating in the sky itself. The great stone arms of the port hold us close, shielding us from the vastness of the outer sea and inviting us to settle into the stillness of the moment. There is no need to hurry, for the harbor will always be here, its gates open to the weary traveler and its waters calm for the resting ship. The wood of the docks, polished by the sea and the sun, feels smooth and cool beneath our feet. The ropes are coiled in neat, heavy spirals smelling of tar and salt, and the anchors rest in the shadows, their work finished for the night. The silence is not an empty one, but a rich and textured quiet, filled with the memory of the day's labor and the promise of tomorrow's connections. We can hear the soft sigh of the wind through the rigging, a lullaby played on 1,000 strings, guiding us toward a state of total relaxation. In this sanctuary of stone and water, the three continents are no longer distant lands, but neighbors sharing a common courtyard. The harbor has brought them together, smoothing the path between them and creating a space where the exchange of goods is also an exchange of peace. We can imagine the warmth of a small fire on the deck of a nearby boat, its flames dancing gently and casting a flickering light on the faces of those who have traveled far to be here. They are at home now, held in the protective circle of the harbor, their journey paused in the most beautiful of ways. The light fades until only the softest shadows remain, and the harbor becomes a place of pure texture and sound. The cool touch of the evening mist settles on the stone, and the distant murmur of the sea beyond the breakwater becomes a faint, rhythmic whisper, a reminder of the vast world that lies outside, yet posing no threat to the calm within. We are safe here, tucked into the fold of the coastline, where the water is shallow and the earth is firm. As we prepare to leave the harbor and follow the coastline toward the next part of our story, we carry this sense of stillness with us. The image of the quiet basin, the resting ships and the silver fish in the clear water remains in our minds, a gentle anchor for our thoughts. The transition from the busy life of the port to the quiet beauty of the natural world is a seamless one, a slow fading of one melody into another. We move away from the stone quays and out toward the soft, sandy fringes of the sea, where the land meets the water in a long, unbroken line of peace. The path ahead is illuminated by the soft glow of the moon, casting a pale light on the dunes and the gentle waves that roll toward the shore with a slow and steady grace. Here, away from the stone walls of the harbor, the world feels vast and open, yet entirely safe, a wide expanse of silver and shadow that invites us to wander further into the quiet heart of the Mediterranean night. The air is cool and smells of salt and wild thyme, a fresh and bracing scent that clears the mind and prepares the spirit for a deeper rest. We follow the curve of the beach, our footsteps silent on the damp sand, as the harbor fades into a soft memory behind us, leaving us alone with the gentle breath of the sea and the infinite sky above. The water beneath us is no longer the deep, ink blue of the open sea, but has softened into a pale, translucent turquoise as we drift toward the sun-drenched edges of the land. Here the air carries a different weight, a fragrance that is both dusty and sweet, smelling of sun-warmed needles and the faint, herbal breath of wild thyme growing in the crevices of the cliffs. As we step onto the shore, the ground feels solid and ancient, a mosaic of white limestone that has been smoothed by centuries of wind and salt until it glows like bone in the afternoon light. This is a landscape shaped by patience, a place where the earth and the sun have held a long, quiet conversation, and where the people who live here have learned to listen to the slow rhythms of the seasons. If you look up the sloping hillsides, you see the silver-green shimmer of the olive groves, a sea of leaves that ripples like water whenever a stray breeze wanders through the valley. These trees are the quiet elders of the Mediterranean, their trunks twisted into magnificent, gnarled shapes that look like weathered hands reaching out of the soil. Some of these trees have stood in this exact spot for hundreds of years, watching the rise and fall of empires with the same steady indifference. Their bark is rough and cool to the touch, deep with fissures that hold the shadows of the morning, and their roots reach deep down into the cool, dark belly of the earth, searching for the hidden moisture that sustains them through the long, golden months of summer. To walk among them is to enter a cathedral of dappled light, where the sun filters through the narrow leaves in tiny, dancing diamonds. There is no rush here, for the olive tree does not hurry. It takes its time to pull the essence of the sun into its small, hard fruit, turning the light of the sky into a rich, golden oil that has fueled the lamps and the lives of people since the very beginning of memory. Imagine the sound of the harvest, not a loud or industrial noise, but the soft, rhythmic tapping of long wooden poles against the branches, and the gentle patter of the olives falling into heavy woven baskets. It is a sound like rain on a thatched roof, a steady domestic music that signals the coming of the cooler months. In the small stone houses that nestle in the folds of these hills, the air smells of this oil, fresh and peppery as it is poured from heavy ceramic jars. It is the liquid gold of the Mediterranean, a substance that smoothed the skin, healed the weary traveler, and gave a deep, earthy richness to the simple bread baked in outdoor ovens. The stone of these houses is the same stone that forms the mountains behind them, a pale, porous limestone that stays cool even when the sun is at its highest point. The walls are thick, built to hold the silence and the shade, and the floors are often made of smooth, flat pebbles gathered from the beach, cool beneath bare feet on a warm afternoon. Intertwined with the olive is the vine, the long, reaching arms of the grape that climb the hillsides in neat, terraced rows. These terraces are marvels of human patience. Thousands of miles of low stone walls built by hand, stone by stone to hold the precious soil against the pull of the rain. They wrap around the mountains like the rings of a tree, turning the steep, rocky slopes into a giant staircase of green. In the spring, the vines are tender and bright, their leaves a soft, translucent emerald. But as the summer deepens, they become heavy with clusters of fruit that turn from green to a dusty, velvet purple. The life of the vine is a quiet one, governed by the heat of the day and the cool, dewy breath of the night. During the harvest, the air is thick with the scent of crushed sugar and fermenting fruit, a heavy, intoxicating aroma that hangs in the still air of the valleys. People work together in the rows, their hands stained dark by the juice, moving with a slow, practiced grace as they fill their wicker hampers. There is a sense of completion in this work, a feeling that the year is folding its wings and preparing for rest. The wine that comes from these grapes is the very taste of the landscape, holding the heat of the stone, the salt of the sea breeze, and the mineral strength of the mountains in every drop. Beyond the groves and the vineyards, the land is defined by the stone itself. This is a world built of rock, where the mountains are never far away, rising up in jagged, lavender peaks that turn gold and crimson as the sun begins its slow descent. The stone is not just a building material. It is the very foundation of how people think and live. It is the marble of the great temples, white and gleaming against the blue of the sky. And it is the rough flint of the farmer's tool. It is the dust on the road that turns your sandals gray, and the cool bench under the village plane tree where the elders sit to watch the shadows grow long. There is a particular kind of silence that exists in a stone landscape, a stillness that feels heavy and permanent. As you walk along the narrow paths that wind between the walls, you can hear the dry rustle of a lizard darting into a crack, or the distant, lonely clink of a goat's bell from a high pasture. The goats move like ghosts across the rocky slopes, their hooves clicking softly on the limestone, grazing on the tough, fragrant shrubs that grow where nothing else can. They provide the milk that is turned into white, salty cheese, a staple of the Mediterranean table that carries the sharp, wild flavor of the mountain herbs. As the afternoon begins to soften into evening, the colors of the land change. The silver of the olives turns to a deep, charcoal gray, and the white stone of the houses takes on a warm, honeyed glow. The long shadows of the cypress trees stretch across the red earth like dark fingers, pointing toward the east where the stars will soon appear. In the kitchens, the fires are being lit, not for heat but for the evening meal, and the scent of roasting vegetables and dried herbs begins to drift through the open doorways. It is a time for quiet conversation, for sitting on the stone doorsteps and feeling the warmth of the day radiating out of the walls and back into the cooling air. The relationship between the people and this land is one of deep, unspoken respect. They know that the soil is thin and the sun is fierce, and so they have learned to waste nothing and to cherish the simple things that the earth provides. A handful of almonds, a piece of honeycomb, a bowl of dark, briny olives. These are the treasures of the Mediterranean, gifts won from the stone and the heat through generations of steady, quiet effort, there is a profound sense of continuity here. A feeling that the way life is lived today is not so very different from the way it was lived thousands of years ago, under the same bright sun and the same wandering moon. As we linger in this landscape of olive and vine, we feel the frantic pace of the modern world begin to dissolve. The clock is not measured in minutes or hours, but in the slow ripening of a fruit, the gradual leaning of a shadow, and the rhythmic cycle of the seasons. The earth beneath us is warm and reliable, a solid presence that cradles the history of 1,000 cultures in its rocky embrace. We can imagine the ancient travelers who walked these same paths, their feet stirring up the same white dust, their eyes resting on these same silver-green hills as they looked for a place to rest for the night. The stone walls that line the roads are like the memories of the land, each rock placed with care, held together by gravity and time. They have seen the passing of many winters and the return of many springs, standing as quiet witnesses to the enduring spirit of the people who call this place home. There is a beauty in this simplicity, a clarity that comes from living in a world made of light and shadow. Wood and stone, it is a place where the senses are gently awakened and then just as gently soothed, where the fragrance of the wild rosemary and the sound of the wind in the pines create a soft, natural lullaby. As the light fades further, the horizon begins to blur, the line between the land and the sea becoming a soft, hazy violet. The cicadas, which have been singing their loud, buzzing song all day, slowly falls silent, replaced by the soft chirping of the crickets in the long grass. The air grows cooler now, carrying the moisture of the nearby water, and the heavy scent of the jasmine flowers that climb the garden walls begins to intensify, filling the night with a sweet, floral perfume that seems to invite sleep. The villages, tucked into the hillsides like birds in a nest, begin to twinkle with small, yellow lights as lamps are lit in the windows. These are the quiet centers of life, where the stories of the day are told in hushed tones and the children are tucked into beds with linen sheets that smell of the sun and the wind. The stone houses act like thermal blankets, releasing the heat they gathered during the day, keeping the rooms warm and comfortable as the night air settles over the valley. There is a deep communal peace that descends upon the landscape, a sense that everything is in its proper place and that the earth is settling down for a long, restorative rest. We find ourselves leaning against a low stone wall, feeling the last lingering warmth of the sun in the rock. The olive trees are now just dark silhouettes against a sky that is turning a deep velvet indigo, and the stars are beginning to wake up, one by one blinking softly in the vast, overhead canopy. There is no sound now but the distant, rhythmic wash of the sea against the shore and the occasional soft sigh of the wind in the treetops. It is a moment of perfect stillness, a time to breathe deeply and let the quiet strength of the land seep into our bones. The olive, the vine, and the stone. These are the three pillars of this world, the elements that have shaped the lives and the dreams of everyone who has ever lived along these shores. They are humble things, yet they possess a quiet majesty that commands our attention and our gratitude. They remind us that life, at its best, is a slow and deliberate process, a matter of deep roots, patient growth, and the ability to find beauty in the most rugged and unyielding of places. As we prepare to leave the hills and return to the water's edge, We carry the scent of the earth with us, a reminder of the solid, grounding presence of the land. The path back to the harbor is illuminated by the soft glow of the moon, which has risen large and silver over the eastern mountains, casting a long, shimmering path across the surface of the sea. The white stones of the path seem to glow from within, guiding our steps with a gentle, milky light, and the air is so still that we can hear the soft crunch of our own footsteps on the gravel. We reach the harbor where our boat is waiting, its wooden hull creaking softly as it nudges against the stone pier. The water is like glass, reflecting the stars and the moon in a perfect, unmoving mirror. As we step back onto the deck, we feel the gentle motion of the sea returning to us, a soft, swaying rhythm that feels like the breathing of a giant. The land behind us is a dark, protective shadow, a place of stability and ancient wisdom that will remain long after we have sailed away. The transition from the solid earth to the fluid sea is a gentle one, a shift from one kind of peace to another. We look back one last time at the silver groves and the terraced hills, seeing them now as a beautiful, intricate tapestry woven by time and human hands. The scent of the pine and the thyme lingers in our clothes, a fragrant souvenir of our time among the stones. The boat begins to drift away from the pier, moving silently out into the dark, quiet expanse of the harbor, leaving the land to its dreams. The stars above are bright and steady, guiding us as we move further away from the shore. The rhythm of the water becomes more pronounced, a slow, hypnotic rocking that lulls the mind and eases the body. We are moving toward the deeper parts of the sea, where the stories of the water and the wind take over from the stories of the earth. The memory of the olive groves and the sun-warmed stone remains with us, a quiet anchor in the back of our minds, providing a sense of safety and belonging as we drift into the vastness of the night. The world is very quiet now, and the only light comes from the celestial map spread out above us in the soft, bioluminescent glow in the wake of the boat. We are suspended between the sky and the deep, held in the gentle embrace of the Mediterranean night. The air is cool and clean, washing away the dust of the road and leaving us feeling light and unburdened. As we settle into the soft cushions of the deck, we feel a deep sense of contentment, a knowing that we are part of a long and beautiful journey that has no need for haste. The sea is a vast, dark cradle, and as we move further into its heart, the sounds of the land fade into a distant, melodic hum. The mountains are now just a low smudge on the horizon, and the lights of the villages have become tiny, flickering sparks that eventually vanish into the darkness. We are alone with the stars and the water, moving through a world that is ancient, peaceful and infinitely wide, as the soft pulse of the Mediterranean carries us gently toward the next quiet chapter of our journey. As the evening air cools and the great expanse of blue begins to deepen into the color of a bruised plum, we find ourselves watching the shift of the seasons along the jagged, silvered coastlines. There is a specific rhythm to the Mediterranean year, a slow and predictable breath that the ancient sailors knew by the very ache in their joints and the changing scent of the breeze. For many months, the sea is a mirror for the sun, a flat and shimmering highway where the light dances in golden coins upon the surface. But as the year turns, the atmosphere begins to thicken and sigh. The bright, sharp clarity of the summer heat softens into a hazy, golden moisture, and the winds, which once blew with a reliable and gentle persistence, begin to gather anew, cooler strength from the distant mountains. This is the time when the great wooden ships, with their curved bellies and their linen sails, would begin to seek the safety of the shore, finding rest in the hidden coves and the stone-lined harbors that smelled of drying salt and old cedar. The Mediterranean winter is not the frozen, white silence of the north, but rather a season of restless gray and deep, resonant greens. It is a time when the sea reclaims its privacy, turning inward and churning the white sand of the shallows into a cloudy, swirling mist beneath the waves. Imagine the sound of the water now, no longer the rhythmic lapping of a summer tide, but a low, rolling growl as the swells grow taller and heavy with the weight of the coming rain. The air smells of ozone and wet stone, of crushed rosemary and the sharp, clean scent of pine needles washed clean by a sudden downpour. It is a season of closing doors and shuttered windows, a time when the grand conversation between the three continents slows to a quiet, intimate whisper around the hearths of 1,000 coastal villages. In the ancient world, the coming of the winter storms brought about a period known as the closing of the seas. It was a time of profound stillness for the merchants and the explorers, a seasonal truce called by the elements themselves. The great ports, which only weeks before had been bustling with the shouting of sailors in a dozen different tongues and the heavy thud of amphorae filled with oil and wine, grew strangely quiet. The ships were hauled up onto the sand, their hulls propped up by sturdy beams of oak, their masts lowered like the tired limbs of a giant. You can almost feel the texture of the dry wood under your hand, the way the salt has crusted into the grain, leaving a fine white powder that glitters in the dim winter light. There is a peace in this cessation of movement, a sense that the world is taking a long, deep breath before the activity of spring returns. Inside the seaside taverns and the small stone houses, the light is orange and flickering, cast by lamps fueled with the very oil that the summer sun helped to ripen. The walls are thick, built to hold the warmth, and the sound of the wind outside only makes the stillness within feel more profound. Here the sailors would sit and mend their nets, their fingers moving with a slow, hypnotic grace as they wove the hempen cords back together. Knot by rhythmic knot, the smell of wood smoke drifts through the rooms, mingling with the scent of roasting chestnuts and the earthy aroma of lentil stew simmering in a clay pot. There is no rush here, no urgency to be anywhere else, for the sea has dictated the pace of life, and the sea has said that now is the time for rest. The storms themselves are grand, majestic events that roll across the water like heavy velvet curtains. They begin as a darkening on the horizon, a smudge of charcoal against the pale gray of the sky, moving slowly toward the land with a deliberate, unhurried power. The clouds are thick and layered, holding the moisture of the Atlantic and the chill of the Alps. And when they finally reach the coast, they release their burden in fat, heavy drops that drum against the terracotta roof tiles. It is a rhythmic sound, a natural lullaby that drowns out the worries of the day. The rain washes the dust from the olive groves, turning the silvery leaves into a deep, vibrant emerald, and the water trickles down the hillsides in 1,000 tiny, musical streams finding its way back to the great basin from which it came. While the surface of the sea is tossed and turned by the wind, deep down in the silent canyons of the Mediterranean floor, the water remains still and dark. The light of the sun does not reach these depths, and the storms of the surface are nothing more than a faint, distant vibration. Here are the ancient shipwrecks, settled into their beds of silt, continue their long, slow transformation into artificial reefs. The amphorae, once carried with such care across the waves, are now home to small, shy fish and delicate sea fans that wave in the slow, internal currents. There is a timelessness in this underwater world, a sense that the cycles of the weather are merely ripples on the surface of a much deeper, much older story. As the storm passes, the air is left incredibly clear, washed clean of all haze and heat. The mountains of Corsica or the distant peaks of the Atlas Range might suddenly appear on the horizon, looking so sharp and near that you feel you could reach out and touch their snow-capped summits. The light after a winter rain has a peculiar, pearlescent quality, reflecting off the wet cobblestones and the puddles in the marketplace. The world feels new, scrubbed, and refreshed, and the people emerge from their homes to breathe in the cold, sweet air. They walk along the harbor walls, watching the way the white foam of the receding tide curls around the dark rocks, a beautiful and fleeting lace that vanishes as quickly as it forms. Logistically, the winter was a time of preparation and repair. In the shipyards, the sound of the adze and the mallet would ring out in the cool air, a steady, rhythmic tapping that spoke of craftsmanship and patience. New planks were shaped from seasoned timber, the scent of fresh sawdust rising to meet the salt spray. Ropes were coiled and inspected, their rough fibers smoothed by experienced hands. There is a deep satisfaction in this kind of work, a slow building toward a future goal that requires no haste. The workers moved with the deliberate pace of those who know the seasons cannot be rushed, their movements synchronized with the natural ebb and flow of the daylight. In the rural hinterlands, the winter rains were a blessing, soaking deep into the thirsty soil to nourish the roots of the vines and the wheat. The farmers watched the clouds with a quiet gratitude, knowing that the water falling now would become the juice of the grape and the golden grain of the harvest months away. They spent their days in the barns and the granaries, tending to the livestock and ensuring that the stores of hay and grain were kept dry and safe. The animals, huddled together for warmth, created a soft, rhythmic sound of chewing and breathing that filled the dark spaces with a sense of living peace. The smell of dry straw and warm wool is a comforting one, a reminder of the simple, essential connections between the land and those who tend it. Even the great cities of the Mediterranean, with their marble temples and wide forums, took on a different character in the winter months. The grand public spaces, usually crowded with merchants and politicians, became quieter, more reflective. The sound of footsteps on the stone floors echoed with a soft, hollow clarity. People wrapped themselves in heavy wool cloaks, the fabric thick and comforting against the chill, and gathered in the bathhouses where the steam rose in white clouds from the heated pools. Imagine the sensation of stepping into that warm, humid air, the way the tension leaves your shoulders as the heat seeps into your skin. The water is still and blue, reflecting the vaulted ceilings, and the only sound is the gentle drip of condensation and the low murmur of voices echoing off the tiles. The winter nights are long and deep, stretching out like a vast, dark blanket over the sea and the land. The stars seem brighter in the cold air, piercing the darkness with a sharp, steady light that guided the few brave souls who might still be traveling by land. In the small villages, the fires would be banked for the night, the glowing embers covered with ash to keep them alive until the morning. There is a profound sense of safety in this darkness, a feeling of being tucked away from the world, protected by the thick stone walls and the heavy wooden doors. The rhythm of breathing in the sleeping houses matches the slow pulse of the tide, a shared cadence that links the human world to the natural one. As the weeks pass, the storms begin to lose their intensity, the intervals of sunlight growing longer and more frequent. The sea, though still cold, begins to settle, its color shifting from a turbulent gray back toward a pale, milky blue. The first wildflowers begin to appear in the sheltered crannies of the cliffs, tiny bursts of yellow and purple that signal the quiet return of the sun. There is no sudden change, no dramatic shift, but rather a slow, graceful transition as the earth prepares to wake from its slumber. The sailors begin to look toward the horizon once more, not with fear of the wind, but with a quiet anticipation for the journey ahead. The wood of the ships, having rested and dried in the winter air, is now ready for the water. The process of launching them is a slow and communal effort, a rhythmic pulling and heaving as the great hulls slide back into the gentle surf. The sound of the water greeting the wood is a soft, splashing welcome, a homecoming for the vessels that have spent the dark months on land. As they bob gently in the shallows, their masts are raised, the ropes tightened, and the white sails unfurled to catch the first tentative breezes of the new season. The conversation between the continents is about to begin again, but it starts in this quiet, hushed way with a single ship carving a slow path through the calm, morning water. We feel the coolness of the winter air beginning to soften, the sharp edges of the wind rounding off into something kinder and more fragrant. The heavy gray clouds are breaking apart, revealing patches of a sky so pale and clear it looks like fine porcelain. The world is poised in this moment of balance, between the rest of the winter and the energy of the spring, a time of quiet readiness that feels both ancient and new. The sea is a vast, patient presence waiting for the sun to climb higher in the sky, its surface rippling with a soft, rhythmic motion that carries no threat, only the promise of a peaceful journey. As we watch the light grow stronger, we feel a sense of calm settling over us, a quiet assurance that the cycles of the world are steady and reliable. The storms have done their work, washing the land and resting the sea, and now they fade into the memory of the year. The air is still, the water is calm, and the horizon is a long, unbroken line of soft color. We are drifting now, moving away from the cold shadows of the winter and toward a light that is warm, golden and infinitely gentle. The sound of the waves is a steady, rhythmic heartbeat, a soothing pulse that lulls the mind into a state of deep, effortless rest. The transition is so subtle that we hardly notice the change, a slow blending of one state of being into the next. The memory of the wind and the rain becomes a soft background hum, a distant echo that only serves to make the current stillness feel more precious. We are cradled by the sea, held in the lap of a world that knows how to rest, how to wait, and how to begin again with a quiet, unhurried grace. The light on the water is a soft, shimmering veil inviting us to close our eyes and let the rhythm of the Mediterranean carry us into a sleep that is as deep and as peaceful as the sea itself. Everything is settling now, the world folding in on itself like the petals of a flower at dusk. The sounds of the shore, the distant tapping of the shipyard, the murmur of the village, all fade into a single, unified silence. The air is perfectly still. The temperature neither warm nor cold, but a soft, neutral embrace that feels like home. We are floating in a space where time has no meaning, where the only thing that matters is the gentle, rising and falling breath of the ocean. It is a moment of total serenity, a quiet pause in the grand story of the continents, as we prepare to drift into the next soft chapter of our long and winding journey. The morning mist lifts slowly from the surface of the water, revealing the gentle curve of a harbor that has welcomed travelers for thousands of years. We find ourselves standing on a quay of pale, sun-warmed stone where the air smells faintly of salt, dried cedar, and the sweet, resinous scent of pine needles heating in the sun. This is the threshold of the world, a place where the deep blue of the sea meets the dusty gold of the land, and where the rhythmic lap of the tide against the harbor walls sounds like the steady breathing of a sleeping giant. In these quiet ports, the three great continents did not just meet. They lined in close to whisper to one another, sharing stories through the simple exchange of goods and the quiet presence of people who had traveled very far just to stand exactly where we are standing now. To look out across the harbor is to see a forest of wooden masts, swaying almost imperceptibly in the light breeze. These ships are made of heavy oak and fragrant cypress, their hulls rubbed with dark pitch that smells of the deep earth and the forest floor. They sit low in the water, burdened with the treasures of distant places, waiting for the sun to climb a little higher before the work of the day begins. There is no rush here, only the slow, methodical movement of ropes being coiled and canvas sails being folded away like heavy linen sheets. The sound of the rigging is a soft, wooden creaking, a gentle percussion that blends with the distant cry of a single gull and the hushed murmur of the tide. Imagine the texture of the cargo being lifted from these ships, moved by hand from the dark holds into the bright clarity of the Mediterranean light. There are large earthenware jars called amphorae. Their surface is cool and slightly rough to the touch, smelling of the damp clay they were shaped from. Inside these jars, protected from the heat, is the thick golden olive oil of the hillsides and the deep, ruby-colored wine of the valleys. When a stopper is removed, the air fills with the scent of crushed fruit and summer grass, a smell that lingers in the shade of the stone warehouses. These jars are stacked in neat, rhythmic rows, creating a landscape of curves and shadows that stretches back into the cool, dim interiors of the port buildings. Walking further into the port, the ground beneath our feet changes from the smooth, weathered stone of the docks to the packed earth of the marketplaces. Here the air grows warmer and more complex, layered with the aromas of spices that have traveled across vast deserts and smaller seas to reach this meeting point. There is the dry, earthy scent of cumin, the sharp sweetness of cinnamon bark, and the cooling hint of dried mint. These spices are kept in small linen bags, tied with twine, and as the merchants move them, tiny clouds of fragrant dust catch the light, dancing in the sunbeams that filter down between the awnings. The colors are muted and soft, ochre terracotta and the pale gray of wood ash, creating a visual harmony that settles the mind and slows the heart. The people who live and work in these ports move with a quiet efficiency, their voices low and melodic as they speak in languages that have blended together over centuries. They wear simple tunics of undyed wool or cool linen, the fabric softened by many washings and the salt of the sea air. There is a sense of shared purpose in the way a knot is tied or a basket is woven from dried reeds. They are not strangers to one another, for the sea has made neighbors of people from very different shores. A merchant from the southern coast shares a cup of cool water with a sailor from the north. And in that simple act, the distances of the world seem to shrink until they are no larger than the space between two people sitting in the shade of a carob tree. As the sun reaches its highest point, the activity of the port slows even further, as if the heat itself is a heavy, invisible blanket inviting everyone to rest. The shadows grow short and dark, hiding in the doorways and under the eaves of the houses that line the harbor. In these quiet moments, the only sound is the persistent, rhythmic chirping of a cicada in a nearby olive grove, a sound that seems to pulse with the warmth of the afternoon. The water in the harbor is as still as a sheet of glass, reflecting the pale blue of the sky and the whitewashed walls of the buildings with a clarity that makes it hard to tell where the sea ends and the land begins. We might wander up a narrow, winding street that leads away from the water, where the air is cooler and smells of damp stone and blooming jasmine. The walls here are thick, built to keep out the heat, and through open windows we can hear the faint clink of a ceramic bowl or the soft rustle of a straw mat being laid down. It is a time for stillness, for letting the mind wander as freely as the vines of ivy that climb the stone walls. The history of these ports is not found in grand gestures, but in these small domestic details. The way a doorstep is worn smooth by generations of feet, or the way a terracotta pot sits on a windowsill, catching the light. In the corner of a small courtyard, a fountain trickles into a stone basin, the water clear and cold from an underground spring. The sound is like soft silver bells, a constant liquid music that washes away the dust of the travel. This water has come from the mountains, traveling through stone channels to reach the heart of the city, just as the ships have traveled across the waves to reach the harbor. Everything is connected in a slow, circular flow, a cycle of arrival and departure that has no beginning and no end. We can sit by the fountain for a long time, watching the way the light plays on the surface of the water, feeling the coolness radiate from the stone. As the afternoon begins to line toward evening, the colors of the port soften into shades of lavender, rose and deep amber. The sun, now lower in the sky, casts long, elegant shadows across the quay, stretching the shapes of the masts and the warehouses until they touch the hills behind the town. The air begins to cool, and with the cooling comes a new scent. The smell of wood smoke from small cooking fires. It is a comforting, grounding smell, speaking of hearths and homes and the simple preparation of a meal. There is the scent of baking bread, warm and yeasty, drifting from a communal oven where the embers are still glowing a soft, dull red. The sailors who spent the day on their ships now step onto the land. Their movements slow and steady as they find their way to familiar spots. They carry with them the stories of the horizon, of how the stars looked on a clear night in the middle of the deep water, and how the air changed as they neared the coast. They do not speak loudly of these things. They share them in the quiet way that one shares a secret, over a bowl of lentils or a handful of dried figs. The port is a place of listening, where the experiences of the three continents are woven together into a single, vast tapestry of human life. In the warehouses, the day's work is gently tucked away. The heavy wooden doors are closed with a solid, satisfying thud, and the iron keys are turned in the locks with a metallic click that echoes softly in the evening air. The goods that traveled so far, the silks that feel like cool water against the skin, the tin and copper that will be melted into tools, the grains that will feed families in distant valleys, are all safe and still. They rest in the dark, waiting for the next part of their journey, just as we rest in the quiet of this moment. There is a profound peace in the knowledge that everything is where it belongs, held in the protective embrace of the stone and the sea. Looking back toward the water, we see that the harbor has become a mirror for the evening stars. The first few lights begin to blink in the sky, pale and steady, and their reflections dance on the dark ripples of the incoming tide. The ships are now dark silhouettes against the velvet blue of the dusk, their masts swaying in a slow, rhythmic lullaby. The creaking of the wood is quieter now, a sleepy murmur that signals the end of the day's journey. The sea, which was a highway of connection and movement, has become a vast, breathing presence that cradles the land in its arms. The transition from the busy life of the port to the stillness of the night is as natural as the breath leaving the body. There is no sharp edge to the evening, only a gradual softening of light and sound. The voices in the streets fade away, replaced by the gentle rustle of the wind in the palm fronds and the distant, rhythmic boom of the surf against the outer sea wall. It is a sound that reminds us of the scale of the world, and yet, standing here in the shelter of the harbor, we feel entirely safe and settled. The great stones of the quay hold the warmth of the sun long after it has set, providing a gentle heat that rises from the ground. We might imagine the many people who have stood on this very spot, looking out at the same stars and feeling the same evening breeze. They were travelers, merchants, dreamers, and families all drawn to the edge of the water by the promise of connection. In this port, the world felt whole, a place where the boundaries between continents were not walls, but bridges of water and wood. The history of the Mediterranean is a history of these quiet arrivals, of the moments when a ship finally rounds the headland and finds the calm water of the harbor, and the weary traveler knows they are finally home. As we linger in the deepening twilight, the textures of the world seem to blur into a single soft sensation: the roughness of the stone, the coolness of the air, the scent of the sea, and the warmth of the fading day all blend together into a peaceful hum. The mind begins to let go of the details, the names of spices and the types of wood, and instead settles into the simple feeling of being present in a place that has seen so much peace. The port is no longer a place of trade or movement. It is a sanctuary, a quiet room at the edge of the world where we can finally close our eyes. The streetlights, small oil lamps perched on iron brackets, are lit one by one, casting a warm, flickering glow onto the cobblestones. They create small pools of light that guide the way, but they do not disturb the darkness. Instead, they make the night feel more intimate. More enclosed, the shadows are soft and deep, like thick blankets of wool, inviting us to find a place of rest. Every doorway and every archway seems to offer a silent welcome, a promise of shelter and a long, undisturbed sleep. The three continents are still there, just beyond the horizon, but for now, they are quiet. The conversations of the day have been tucked away, and the world is content to simply exist in the silence. The sea continues its slow, steady pulse, a reminder that the world is always moving, even when we are still. It is a comforting thought, a rhythm that matches our own breathing as we prepare to leave the harbor behind and move toward the deeper stillness that awaits us. The air is now completely cool, filled with the clean, sharp scent of the salt spray and the faint, lingering sweetness of the evening flowers. The harbor walls stand strong and silent, protectors of the calm water within. We can feel the weight of the history here, not as a burden but as a foundation, a solid, unmoving reality that supports us as we drift further into the night. The stories of the old world are not gone. They are merely resting, carved into the stone and dissolved in the water, waiting for the next sunrise to be told again in the quiet language of the ports. As we turn our gaze away from the flickering lamps and toward the open sea, the darkness feels vast and kind. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to see but the slow movement of the stars and the gentle sway of the water. The journey of the day is complete, and the harbor has done its work, bringing the world together and then letting it rest. The continents are linked by the quiet paths of the water, and we are linked to them by the simple act of being here, in this moment of profound and heavy peace. The silence of the port is a deep, resonant thing, like the final note of a song that lingers in the air long after the music has stopped. It is a silence that invites us to let go of our thoughts and follow the rhythm of the tide. The buildings, the ships, and the stones are all settling down, sinking into the cool embrace of the night. We feel ourselves sinking with them, our movements becoming slower, our thoughts becoming lighter and more distant, like the white foam on the crest of a small wave. Everything is settling now, the dust of the marketplace, the ripples in the water, and the hum of the city. The great ports of the old world are closing their eyes, their heavy wooden gates held fast by the quiet of the night. The sea remains a constant and soothing presence, whispering its ancient stories to the shore in a language that needs no translation. It is a lullaby for the continents, a soft song of salt and stone that carries us toward the next horizon. As the last light in the harbor is extinguished, we are left with the soft, gray glow of the moon on the water. The world is soft, the air is still, and the journey continues in the quietest of ways, moving like a dream through the calm and sheltered waters of the night. The water here is a deep and velvet blue, a shade that feels heavy with the weight of time and the softness of a long-held secret. As we look down from the surface, The sunlight begins to break apart, scattering into long, shimmering ribbons of pale turquoise that dance and then slowly fade into a gentle, muted indigo. There is no wind here, no rush of the tide, only the immense and steady pulse of the sea as it cradles everything that has ever slipped beneath its skin. For thousands of years, the Mediterranean has acted as a vast, liquid library, catching the things that fell from the hands of merchants and sailors, wrapping them in blankets of fine silt, and holding them in a cool, dark silence where the clocks of the world simply cease to tick. Imagine the floor of the sea not as a jagged place of wreckage, but as a soft and undulating landscape of sand, as smooth as a bedsheet that has been pulled tight across a quiet room. Down in the dim light, where the temperature never changes and the currents move with the slow grace of a swaying curtain, lie the remains of 1,000 wooden ships. They are not broken so much as they are sleeping, their timbers turned to the color of charcoal and honey, resting so deeply in the mud that they have become part of the earth itself. There is a profound stillness in these places, a sense of peace that comes from being forgotten by the busy world above, where the sun still burns and the waves still white-cap in the breeze. If you were to drift down through the layers of blue, passing the silver flash of a lonely fish and the slow, rhythmic pulse of a jellyfish, you would eventually find the cargo. It is the cargo that tells the quietest stories. Here, resting in a neat and orderly row, are hundreds of clay jars, the amphorae that once sat in the bellies of Roman and Phoenician galleys. They are elegant things, shaped like long tiers with narrow necks and sturdy handles, designed to be tucked into the sand of a ship's hold, just as they now tuck into the sand of the seabed. Many of them are still sealed with plugs of pine resin or bits of cork, holding within them the ghosts of ancient harvests. Think of the scent of those cargoes as they were first loaded, under a sun that felt warm on the shoulders of the sailors. There was the thick, sweet smell of dark wine from the hills of Greece, the golden, peppery aroma of olive oil pressed in the groves of Spain, and the sharp, salty tang of fermented fish sauce from the coast of North Africa. Now all that remains is the clay, which has grown a soft coating of white coral and tiny, delicate shells that look like lace. The sea has claimed these vessels, turning them into small, stony reefs where tiny crabs might make a home, tucked away in the hollows where once there was only the sound of liquid sloshing against the walls of the jar. The wood of the ships themselves has often been smoothed away by the patient work of the water, leaving only the heavy things behind. You might find a heap of lead ingots, dull and gray, which were meant to be melted down into pipes or coins, or perhaps a collection of millstones, carved from volcanic rock, resting exactly where they fell when the wooden deck finally sighed and gave way. There is something deeply comforting about the way the sea organizes these things, laying them out in a quiet gallery that no one was ever meant to see. There is no clutter here, only the slow accumulation of history, settling down layer by layer, like dust motes in a shaft of afternoon light. In the shallower reaches where the water is clear and the color of a robin's egg, you might find the remains of a harbor that the sea decided to keep for itself. Along the coast of Egypt or the shores of Turkey, there are entire streets and courtyards that now live beneath the waves. The stone steps of a quay, worn smooth by the sandals of thousands of people, Now feel the soft brush of seaweed instead. The grand marble columns that once stood tall against the sky have toppled over into the sand, looking like the fallen trunks of great, pale trees. They lie there in the dappled light, surrounded by the quiet hum of the ocean. Their carvings of acanthus leaves and scrolling vines becoming a playground for small, colorful fish that dart in and out of the shadows. Imagine walking along one of these underwater streets, where the only sound is the muffled thrum of your own heartbeat and the distant, low moan of the deep water. The mosaics on the floors of the old villas are still there. They're tiny stones of red, white and black, forming patterns of dolphins and waves that seem to move when the light ripples above them. The sea has preserved these patterns with a tenderness that the wind and the rain on land could never manage. Under the water, there is no erosion from the frost, no scorching from the sun. There is only the steady, protective embrace of the salt, which keeps the colors bright and the edges soft. Further out in the vast plains of the deep, the treasures are smaller and more personal. A bronze lamp shaped like a sleeping lion rests in a pocket of silt, its wick long gone, but its form as sharp as the day it was cast. A handful of copper coins, fused together by time into a single, heavy lump, lies near a silver cup that once caught the light of a flickering fire in a captain's cabin. These objects do not feel lost. They feel as though they have reached their final destination, a place where they no longer have to serve a purpose, where they can simply exist in the cool, dark cradle of the Mediterranean. The mud of the seabed is a miraculous thing. It is fine and silty, like the softest flower, and it settles over the wrecks with a gentleness that defies description. It fills the gaps between the planks. It packs itself into the mouths of the jars, and it creates a seal that keeps the oxygen away. Because of this, things that should have rotted away long ago are still here. We find scraps of leather sandals, bits of woven rope, and even the remains of a basket filled with walnuts. Their shells still perfect and brown, preserved in a pocket of time where the air never reaches. It is as if the sea has decided to hold its breath, keeping these small pieces of daily life safe from the passing centuries. As we move through this underwater world, we see the anchors. There are so many anchors, from every age of man's journey across these waters. Some are simple stones with a single hole bored through the center, used by the very first people who dared to leave the sight of land. Others are heavy iron hooks, rusted into beautiful, craggy shapes that look like the branches of a winter tree. Each one represents a moment when a ship decided to stay, to tether itself to the earth and rest for a while. And for those that stayed forever, the anchor remains the final point of contact, a heavy weight that holds the story of the voyage in place, deep beneath the white foam of the waves. The light is dimming now as we move into the quietest parts of the night, and the sea feels even larger, a vast and gentle giant that covers half the world. The things that sank are not gone. They are merely resting, tucked away in the great blue folds of the Mediterranean's cloak. They are part of a long, slow conversation between the land and the water, a dialogue that has been going on since the first pebble rolled down a beach and into the surf. There is a great dignity in this stillness, a sense that everything is exactly where it needs to be, held in the cool and steady hands of the deep. The water above continues to move, the waves rising and falling in a rhythmic lullaby that carries the ships of the present toward their distant ports. But down here in the soft darkness, there is no hurry. The silt continues to fall, grain by grain, covering the old wood and the weathered stone in a velvet layer of forgetting. It is a place of absolute peace, where the weight of the ocean acts as a warm blanket, pressing down with a comfort that is as old as the world itself. The stories are safe here, drifting in the slow currents, waiting for nothing, content to simply be. As the currents sway with a slow and deliberate grace, we find ourselves moving toward the edges of the sea, where the deep blue begins to lighten into the soft, pale greens of the shallows. The transition is as gentle as a sigh, a slow rising from the dark heart of the water toward the places where the land and the sea meet in a quiet embrace. The silence of the deep stays with us, a lingering sense of calm that settles into the bones, reminding us that even the things that are lost are never truly gone. They are simply resting in a different kind of light, in a world that moves to a much slower and more peaceful drumbeat. The sand beneath us becomes ribbed and golden, reflecting the very last of the moonlight that filters down through the clear, still water. We pass over a field of seagrass, the long green blades waving slowly back and forth like a field of wheat in a gentle breeze. Each blade is a home for a tiny seahorse or a translucent shrimp, living their quiet lives in the shelter of the forest. The movement is hypnotic, a rhythmic swaying that lulls the mind into a state of perfect rest. There is no sound here but the faint, rhythmic pulse of the water, a low and steady hum that feels like the very breath of the earth. We are moving now toward the shore, where the water is so thin and clear that it feels like air. The small pebbles on the bottom are round and smooth, polished by centuries of gentle tumbling until they glow like pearls in the dim light. The shore is a place of transition, where the stories of the deep come to rest against the stories of the land. It is a soft boundary, a place where the salt spray meets the scent of wild thyme and the warm, earthy smell of sun-baked rocks. The transition is seamless, a slow merging of two worlds that have known each other since the beginning of time. The air above the water is cool and still, carrying the faint, sweet aroma of orange blossoms from a grove hidden somewhere in the hills. The stars are reflected in the mirror-like surface of the sea, creating a double world of light and shadow that stretches out to the horizon. It is a moment of perfect balance, where the heaviness of the deep and the lightness of the air meet in a quiet harmony. The journey through the sunken world has left us feeling grounded and steady, as if we too have found a place to rest in the soft, protective silt of the Mediterranean's memory. The waves lap against the shore with a sound that is no louder than a whisper, a repetitive and soothing cadence that marks the passage of time without any sense of urgency. Each small splash is a gentle reminder of the sea's presence, a constant and reliable friend that has seen the rise and fall of empires and the simple daily lives of millions of people. The water is a bridge, a connector, a keeper of secrets, and a bringer of peace. As we stand on the edge of the land, looking out over the dark and shimmering expanse, we feel the immense scale of the sea, not as something daunting, but as something vast and comforting, a cradle for the history of the world. The night is deep now, and the world has tucked itself in for a long and restorative sleep. The ships that rest on the bottom are at peace, their cargoes of wine and oil and stones settled forever in the sand. The cities beneath the waves are silent, their marble halls filled with the cool, blue light of the ocean. And we too are settling down, our thoughts moving as slowly as the deep currents, our hearts beating in time with the rhythmic pulse of the tide. The sea has given us its stories, and now it offers us its stillness, a profound and heavy quiet that wraps around us like a cloak of soft wool. The transition to the final part of our journey is almost imperceptible, a slow fading of one thought into the next. The memories of the sunken ships and the lost harbors begin to blur at the edges, becoming a soft and hazy dream of blue and gold. We are drifting now not through the water, but through the quiet spaces of the mind, where the lessons of the past and the peace of the present meet and mingle. The Mediterranean remains a constant and gentle presence in the background, its waters forever moving, forever holding, and forever whispering the secrets of the ages to anyone who is quiet enough to listen. The stars above the Mediterranean seem to drift closer to the water, their light softening as it touches the gentle ripples of the surface. Everything is slowing down, the breath becoming long and easy, the mind finding a comfortable place to rest among the echoes of the ancient world. The scent of the sea, that mixture of salt and old stone and deep, cool water, is a lullaby in itself, a fragrance that speaks of home and safety and the long, slow march of time. We are ready now to leave the deeps behind and find our way back to the warmth of the shore, where the fire is low and the shadows are long and soft. The journey continues, but the movement is so slight that it feels like standing still. We are moving toward the final chapter of this long and storied sea, toward the places where the people live and the sun still rises to warm the ancient stones. But the peace of the sunken world stays with us, a quiet anchor that keeps us steady and calm. The Mediterranean has taught us that even in the dark, there is beauty, and even in the silence, there is a wealth of stories waiting to be told. The water is a blanket, the sand is a bed, and the night is a long and gentle promise of rest. As we move toward the light of a new idea, we carry the stillness of the deep with us, a quiet treasure that no storm can ever disturb. The sea is at rest, the land is at rest, and the world is a place of profound and beautiful quiet. The journey is nearly complete, and the final destination is a place of warmth and light, where the stories of the sea meet the stories of the sun, and everything is held in a state of perfect, peaceful balance. The transition from the day's warmth into the softness of the evening begins with a change in the color of the air itself, a shifting from the bright, clear gold of the afternoon into a hue that resembles aged honey or the pale, dusty skin of a ripening peach. As the sun begins its slow and deliberate descent toward the western rim of the sea, the water loses its sharp, diamond-like glitter and takes on the heavy, rhythmic quality of molten silk. This is the hour when the Mediterranean seems to exhale, releasing the heat it has gathered since dawn, and the coastal breeze turns from a brisk salt spray into a gentle, cedar-scented sigh that moves through the silver leaves of the olive groves. In this quiet light, the three continents that cradle these waters seem to draw a little closer together. their jagged coastlines softened by the haze, their long histories settling into the shadows like tired travelers finding a place to rest. If you were to stand on a limestone terrace overlooking the Aegean at this hour, you would notice how the sounds of the world begin to change, becoming rounded and distant as if wrapped in layers of soft wool. The distant rhythmic clatter of a wooden fishing boat heading back to the harbor becomes a comforting pulse, a reminder of the thousands of years that people have navigated these same currents in vessels made of pine and oak. You can almost smell the scent of the harbor as it nears, a mixture of wet ropes, salt-crusted wood, and the faint, savory aroma of a kitchen fire being lit in a small stone house nearby. There is no hurry in this movement. The boat follows the path of the waning light, cutting a slow, silver wake through the water that ripples outward until it vanishes against the silent cliffs. The light now begins to catch the edges of the ancient architecture that lines these shores, turning the whitewashed walls of the islands into glowing lanterns of soft pink and violet. In the mountains of the north, the stone ruins of temples and theaters catch the last rays, their fluted columns casting long, elegant shadows across the dry grass in the wild thyme. These stones have watched this same sunset for more than 20 centuries, and they hold the coolness of the coming night within their deep, porous grains. There is a profound stillness in the way the shadows grow, a slow stretching of the earth as it prepares to sleep. And as the sun dips lower, the horizon line begins to blur, until the deep indigo of the sea and the pale lavender of the sky become a single, seamless curtain of color. Imagine the feeling of the air against your skin, no longer hot but still carrying the memory of the sun's touch, a velvet-like warmth that makes the evening feel like a protective cloak. In the villages that dot the hillsides from the coast of Spain to the shores of the Levant, the pace of life slows to a rhythmic murmur. People move with a quiet grace, closing wooden shutters with a soft thud, setting small terracotta lamps on tables, and pouring cool water from clay jars that have been kept in the shade. The water tastes of the earth and the deep wells, refreshing and pure, a simple gift of the landscape. There is a sense of communal arrival in these moments, a shared understanding that the work of the day is complete and the time for reflection has begun. As the light fades further, the textures of the landscape become more pronounced, revealed by the low, raking rays that illuminate the ripples in the sand and the gnarled bark of the ancient cypress trees. The sea itself becomes a mirror, reflecting the first faint stars that appear in the east, tiny points of light that have guided sailors, merchants and dreamers since the first rafts were pushed out from the shore. These stars are the same ones that the Phoenician traders watched as they carried purple dyes and cedar logs across the waves, the same ones that the astronomers of Alexandria mapped from their high towers. The sky is a vast, dark map of stories, and the Mediterranean lies beneath it like a quiet bowl of ink, holding the reflections of the cosmos in its gentle, undulating swells. The scent of the evening grows deeper now, enriched by the dampness of the falling dew. It is the smell of jasmine climbing over a stone wall, the earthy sweetness of ripe figs, and the sharp, clean fragrance of pine needles drying on the forest floor. This scent carries with it the essence of the three continents, a blend of the African desert's dry heat, the lush greenery of Europe's valleys, and the spice-laden air of the Near East. It is a fragrance that has been traded and mingled for eons. A sensory record of the ways these lands have spoken to one another through the language of the wind and the waves. To breathe it in is to feel the immense scale of time, yet also the intimate comfort of a single, peaceful moment. In the harbors, the water laps against the stone quays with a sound that is both repetitive and melodic, a liquid percussion that lulls the senses. The boats, tied securely with thick hempen lines, rise and fall with the tide, their masts swaying slightly against the darkening sky like the pendulums of slow-moving clocks. In the small cafes that line the water's edge, the clink of a glass or the low hum of a conversation feels small and precious against the vast silence of the sea. There is no urgency here, only the steady, reliable rhythm of the tides and the slow rotation of the earth. The world is settling into its foundations, and the sea is the great stabilizer, the vast blue heart that keeps the pulse of the continent steady and calm. As the last sliver of the sun vanishes below the waves, a deep, resonant blue takes hold of the world. This is the hour of the blue light, when the air seems to glow from within and the outlines of the hills become soft and hazy. The olive trees, with their silver-backed leaves, appear like ghosts in the twilight, their twisted trunks holding the wisdom of many generations. They have seen the rise and fall of empires, the coming and going of countless seasons, yet they remain rooted in the rocky soil, silver and silent in the evening air. There is a deep comfort in their presence, a reminder of the endurance of life and the steady continuity of the natural world. The Mediterranean is a sea of memories, but at this hour it is also a sea of dreams. The legends of heroes and gods, of long voyages and miraculous returns, seem to float just beneath the surface of the water, dissolved into the salt and the foam. But they are quiet now, resting in the deep trenches and the hidden grottos, leaving the surface clear and still. The water is so calm that you can see the reflection of the coastal lights stretching out across the surface like long, golden fingers reaching toward the center of the sea where the water is deepest and most silent. This is the space where the continents truly meet. In the quiet, dark heart of the water where the boundaries between land and sea dissolve. In the distance, the faint sound of a bell might carry across the water from a monastery perched high on a cliffside. The sound is thin and clear, a silver thread in the tapestry of the night, marking the hour of rest. It is a sound that has echoed through these valleys for 1,000 years. A call to stillness that is answered by the rustle of the wind in the reeds and the soft splash of a fish jumping in the bay. Everything is in its place. The mountains are heavy and solid. The sea is vast and cradling, and the sky is an endless canopy of peace. The day has passed into history, and the night is a clean slate, a cool and quiet room where the mind can wander without effort. As you lean back into the softness of the night, you might imagine the many people throughout history who have sat in this same spot, watching this same transition from light to dark. They would have felt the same cooling of the air, heard the same rhythmic pull of the tide, and felt the same sense of belonging to a world that is much larger than themselves. There is a profound sense of companionship in this shared experience, a thread of human connection that stretches back to the very first fires lit on these shores. We are all part of this long, slow story of the sea, a story that is told in the language of light and water, of salt and stone. The darkness is not a void, but a presence, a soft and velvety texture that invites the body to let go of its weight. The stars are brighter now, casting a faint, silvery glow over the landscape, enough to see the pale path of a dusty road winding up into the hills. The road leads past stone walls and sleeping gardens, past old wells and quiet orchards, up toward the high places where the air is thin and cold. But here by the water, the air remains soft and kind, a gentle lullaby for the senses. The sea continues its work, washing the shore with a steady, rhythmic grace, cleaning the sand and smoothing the stones, preparing the world for the arrival of a new dawn. But dawn is many hours away, and for now there is only the deep, restorative quiet of the Mediterranean night. The three continents are tucked into the darkness, their voices stilled, their fires dimmed to glowing embers. The sea that made them talk to each other now offers them the gift of silence, a space where the echoes of the day can fade away and the spirit can find its center. The water is a cradle, the land is a bed, and the sky is a blanket of stars. There is nothing left to do but listen to the breath of the sea. A long, slow inhalation and a long, slow exhalation over and over again. The light on the water has vanished, replaced by the deep, liquid blackness of the night. Yet the memory of the gold and the violet remains, a warm glow in the mind's eye. The ripples have smoothed out into a glassy stillness, and the horizon is gone, leaving only the sensation of being held in a vast, starlit space. The world is at peace. The history of the sea is at rest, and the silence is as deep and nourishing as the water itself. As the cool air drifts through the room, carrying the last faint scent of salt and pine, the mind begins to drift as well, floating on the surface of a dreamless sea, guided by the steady, rhythmic pulse of the tide. Everything is settling now, moving toward a state of perfect, motionless quiet. The stones are cooling, the trees are still, and the water is a mirror for the infinite. The journey across the centuries and across the waves has reached its gentle conclusion, finding its home in the softness of the evening light and the deep embrace of the dark. There is a sense of completion in the air, a feeling that every story has been told and every wave has reached its shore. The Mediterranean, the sea of the middle of the earth, rests in the center of the night, a vast and silent heart beating in time with the stars. And in this stillness, the world is finally, deeply and beautifully asleep.